Have you ever had the dream of going out to the countryside, getting a couple of animals, starting a garden, starting an orchard? Well, this is called homesteading, and today we're going to talk about it. Welcome to the Zion home, off-grid and self-reliant. So what is homesteading? Well, at its core, it's essentially the idea of producing your own food. Now, the term homesteading is a historical term. When you started a homestead, you were leaving developed society and going out to the frontier. And America has a rich history of homesteading. In fact, the state where I grew up in, Oklahoma, there was this thing called the land rush, where they literally fired a gun to open up the land available for settlers. And you had to race to find the best spots. And you just put a stake in the ground and that land was officially yours. Well, to start your homestead, obviously the first thing you'd want to do is build a house. And in the eastern forests, or up in the Rocky Mountains, it was almost always a log cabin. But if you were on the plains, it was a sod hut, where you literally cut strips of grass and stacked them one on top of each other, kind of like bricks, to create a tiny little cabin made out of grass. And in fact, my great-grandmother, on my father's side, was actually born in a sod hut. She was born in a sod hut out on the plains of Colorado. So the first thing you would always do is start a house. In modern times, the first thing you probably want to do when starting a homestead is build a house. Now, it can be something as simple as driving an RV and parking it there. It can be a tiny house. In fact, for most of history, this is how houses worked. You built a small house first, so that way you could live in the small house while you worked on the big house. Now, historically, while you were building your house, you really needed to make sure you had a source of water, so that way you wouldn't die of dehydration. And depending on how far out into the frontier you were, you needed to start producing grains as soon as possible. Otherwise, you and your animals would die. When my ancestors settled into the Salt Lake Valley, they didn't even start building houses before they started getting grains in the ground because they were late in the season, because they went so far out into the frontier that they were like, all right, we need food first, and then we'll worry about whether or not we'll freeze to death in the winter. In modern times, you don't have that problem. You can go to the grocery store. So the first thing you need to do is build your house. The second thing you need to do is work on your water systems. How are you acquiring water? How are you cleaning it? How are you heating it up for use? How are you disposing of the wastewater? These are all very important. Work on your water systems. This could include digging a well or digging a pond. Building a rain catchment system. Doesn't matter. You need water. Now, what you shouldn't be doing is starting a garden or getting animals. Yes, I know that's the whole point of homesteading. That's why you want to go out to the countryside, so that way you can do a garden, an orchard, and animals. The first year you're out there, you should be working on your house, getting everything in your house in order. You can plant some perennials like fruit trees or nut trees or bushes. Those take a lot of time to grow up, so get them in the ground as fast as possible. But don't go starting projects that require a regular daily input of time, like a garden or animals. You need to focus on getting your house built first. Then you need to start focusing on other infrastructure items, like for instance, fencing. You are not allowed to get animals until you have the entire area that you would like to put animals in properly fenced. Don't do it. It'll create so many headaches. Same thing with a garden. Figure out where you want to put the garden. Start building your garden beds up. Don't go trying to plant 50 heads of lettuce when the inside of your house is still spare studs. Now, that's essentially what a homestead is. It's a house out in the countryside where you are producing your own food. It doesn't have to be off-grid. A lot of homesteads are off-grid, but it doesn't have to be off-grid. And in fact, a off-grid house doesn't have to be a homestead. In fact, there might be stages of my life where my house will be off-grid, but I won't have any animals. I won't have a garden. I'll have an orchard because the trees will still exist, but I won't be maintaining it. And that Might not necessarily happen, but it might happen. And I'll just have a off-grid house on some land. A homestead is where you're actively trying to produce food for yourself. A farm is different from a homestead. A farm is a business, and farms can take many different shapes. You can have a market garden where you're growing crops with the intention of selling them. You could be doing livestock. A small homestead farming operation can be meat chickens. You buy 100 chickens, keep 20 or so for yourself for the year, and then raise up and butcher and sell the other 80. You can scale it up, scale it down, doesn't matter. You really don't want to scale it much further down than that, but you could scale it down. The goal of a farming enterprise is to make money. The goal of a homesteading enterprise is to become more self-reliant, to produce your own goods for yourself. And being off-grid just means that you are not connected, in the strictest of terms, to the power grid. Now, you can be off the water grid, you can be off the sewage grid. And these three terms, you can be all three if you want. You can be off-grid, a homestead, and a farm. Or you could be just off-grid, or you can be a homestead that is on the grid. Doesn't matter. The Zion Home will help make any and all of this possible.